Based on the leaks, could the PS5 Pro be powerful enough to open the gates to path tracing on console in games such as Cyberpunk 2077 or Alan Wake 2? And I would suspect not, but Alex, thoughts?
I would just say no, because AMD's, even their best stuff, like the 7900 XTX, they're like, they still struggle, because the thing is, like, the whole hardware accelerated angle of RT is not just like the way AMD does it. There are a lot of other things that make it allow it to be more performant on Intel, and specifically NVIDIA here. So like, yes, maybe the new, which you keep reading a lot about stuff online, like maybe it can do hardware intersections of like the BVH boxes and the triangles faster. That's interesting, but that's not the only thing that like ray tracing involves and what makes it expensive. It's one aspect of that makes it expensive. But if another aspect is making it expensive, like path tracing, like with NVIDIA, for example, they made SER, shorter execution reordering, which allows, because path tracing is constantly like checking against materials and shaders for different types of objects all the time. And that messes up the, like essentially you can't do parallel work as easily on a GPU, which is a massively parallel computing device. It takes away one of the core advantages of having a GPU because the way path tracing works. NVIDIA came up with an attempted hardware solution to that has an entire API based around it. And if the PS5 Pro only upgrades like this one aspect, for example, of the way ray tracing is done, so more cores and it can do those rates faster, well, that doesn't approach the problem of like how much branching workloads there are with things like path tracing to the same way Intel or NVIDIA would do it. So it wouldn't make it any more viable necessarily. It would just have like maybe a slightly higher frame rate for like a slightly better frame time for one aspect of the ray tracing workload, but the other aspect would bog it down so much so that it's not really greatly playable. This is like, so like, that's why, for example, if you test out RDNA 3 in a path tracing game, versus its competitor, it'll show greater divergence versus looking at like an RDNA 2 friendly ray tracing implementation where it doesn't have to worry about all these things due to simplicity. Mm-hmm. So I would say I wouldn't expect it. I would be greatly surprised. I would be like it. But
I've got two answers to this question, which is, if you take a look at what 7900 XTX is doing with path tracing, it's not really doing the job, right? And I would suspect that 7900 XTX path ray tracing support is probably going to be more performant than PlayStation 5 Pro, simply by virtue of the fact it's got so many more CUs. So even if it is from an older architecture, just the sheer brute force extra power that the 7900 XTX should at least give you, like, at very best, a ballpark estimation of what may be possible with a much smaller part, right?
Right.
And, it's not really doing it particularly well. Maybe if there's like literally a game built from the ground up for PlayStation 5 Pro, possibly, but it's not going to happen realistically. And secondly, if you look at the developer disclosures that were leaked, basically what they're saying is, here's what you can do with ray tracing on PlayStation 5 Pro. One example is a game may have RT reflections and you can add RT shadows. Another example was a game may not ship with ray tracing on PlayStation 5, but could ship with it on PlayStation 5 Pro. In no way are Sony making claims that this is what has been referred to in some areas of the press as a quote unquote ray tracing beast. It's just better at ray tracing. That's the bottom line. And the examples specifically that Sony has given look useful, but not in any way like totally game changing in the way that we saw with Cyberpunk 2077 or Alan Wake 2 for that matter. Alan Wake 2, very heavy game.
Super heavy game.
Yeah,
my goodness.
as is Cyberpunk.